Hello everyone. In this video, we'll discuss creation of standard invoices, both the cases, which is non-PO invoice and also the PO invoice. So typically non-PO is also called as unmatched invoices, whereas PO we call as a matched invoices. So we'll see the both matched and unmatched, and we'll see the credit memo, debit memo, manage invoices. In order for you to query any invoices, how do you manage your invoices? Validate the invoices. How do you validate invoices in bulk, and also approval workflow in bulk? How can you, if there is any approvals existing in your system, rather than submitting one-on-one invoice to your approver, how can you submit in bulk? So there is a brief agenda. We'll get to the application now. So accounts payable specialist is the one who can create the invoices. So for this current user, we have assigned the accounts payable specialist. Let us try to create the invoices. So for which I need to go to the dashboard area called payables. So for in which I'll select the icon invoices. So in the task list, okay, you have the task list on the right hand side. So where you can create the invoice. So I'm selecting the task create invoice. So let me select the business unit NVI Telecom BU. Okay, so you need to select the supplier. So the first thing is we are creating a non-PO invoice. Later on we'll create a PO invoice. So supplier Reliance. So Reliance Communication is my supplier. I'm selecting it. So if one supplier is having multiple sites, you can just drop down and select. Here in this case we have only one supplier site, so I'm just selecting the site. Invoice group. So you can give any invoice group if need be. Okay. So invoice number. So vendor would have been provided you with an invoice. So you can give invoice number that has been given by the vendor. So what is the total amount? Okay, and give the description. Let us say these are consultancy charges. So you can give the invoice date and also the payment terms. Expand the lines. So once you are done with the header, you can get to the lines. So where you can give the line amount. So here the line amount ideally is exclusive of tax. So once you validate the invoice, taxes can be calculated. So in this scenario, it's no taxes. So I'm just selecting the header and line the same amounts. And once you are selected, you can give the distribution combinations. So you can press tab, or else you can expand this and select this blue color icon over here. So either the distribution set or the distribution combination, either one thing is mandatory, not the both. Either the distribution set or distribution combinations, either one of the thing is mandatory. So let me select the distribution combination here. So I know the defaults value, so I'm just giving it. So let me select the natural account, which is consultancy. So can give search here. So typically my expenses are 5 series, so I'm just giving a 5 series here. And then so since it's a consultancy charges, I'm selecting the expense related to the consultancy charges. So I can select the product if need be. I'm just selecting defaults. Intercompany none, assuming that this has been incurred only for the same company. Common value. So once you select the distribution combination, you can just do OK. Once you have selected the distribution combination, now you can also check if any taxes has been calculated, if you are including any prepayments or applying any prepayments, and you can select the see the due and then total amount. And then once you're done, you can give validate invoice actions, validate the invoice. Also, if you're using Chrome, you can also give a shortcut Control Alt V in order for you to validate the invoice. So invoice is validated. Once invoice is validated, so you can initiate for approval. If invoice is subjected to the approval, you can initiate for the approval. So invoice actions to initiate an approval, invoice actions, approval, and then initiate. So currently there is no approvals for this business unit, so I'm not doing that step. So once you do the approval and your approver approves it, you can post ledger. So you can click on post ledger. So accounting is done. You can just click on view accounting. So you can see the accounting entry, which is item expense debit to the liability. So expense, we are the one who has provided it. So in case of a non-PO, user shall provide the expense combination, and the liability will be picked from the common options. In the manage common options for payables and procurement, you define the common liability. So the liability account will be picked from the common options. Otherwise, if you are given the liability account at the site assignments in your supplier level, so that combination will be picked from the supplier site assignment. So I shall give done and proceed to the PO invoice. So now let us create a PO invoice, for which I'll navigate to the task list and then click on create invoice. So I need to select the PO in case of PO invoice. So I'll select, let's say, the purchase order number 1631. So yeah, so I'll get to the first thing, as against allied manufacturing. Okay, so you need to select the purchase order. So the moment you select the purchase order, so you'll get the default business unit, supplier side, and the legal entity, and also the currency as against the PO. So even the payment terms will be defaulted as against the PO. Only thing is, the moment the vendor submits you the invoice, okay, you can select the invoice number, NVPO 101, let's say. So you give the total amount of the invoice, let's say 5,000. Okay, and give the description, let's say consumables or something like that. Okay, so and then you need to expand the lines and you match the invoice lines with the PO. Okay, you select the option match invoice lines and you need to select on this icon go. So once you give it go, you could see the receipts, the purchase orders and the receipts as against the PO. You can just click OK and you can see the quantity that you will be billing is 200, unit price of 25 with a total amount of 5,000. So that is what our invoice is also. You could see order 200, available 200, available for billing. So at this point in time, billed is 0, received is 200. Okay, so I give apply and then OK. Okay, so my line amount will be getting automatically populated. Unlike non-PO, I need not provide any distribution combination. The charge account, okay, will pick if it is an expense invoice. The charge account will be picked from the PO. If it is a inventory related PO, then your accrual account will be getting picked. So let us see the distribution combination here. So if you click on the distributions, okay, here you could see this is an accrued receipt. So yeah, so my AP accrual is getting debited and create my supplier liability at the time of invoice. See here, there is an accrued receipt. Okay, you can use save and close. Yeah, so you could see now the tax is calculated for 412.5. So let me try to modify the header amount to that extent, 5412.5. So and then let me validate this invoice. So my invoice is validated. So I'm done with the PO invoice creation. So PO invoice, you need to select the identifying PO and need to match with the invoice lines. That's all. Now let us proceed to create a credit memo and debit memo. So I'll just show the credit memo. So debit memo is a similar step. So we'll create a credit memo first. So select your own business unit. Okay, so let's say NV Telecom BU for mine. Okay, and then select the supplier. So let us say Tata supplier. So Tata Steel is my supplier. I'm selecting the Tata Steel. Okay, so you can give the invoice number. Let us say it's credit note 11901. So I'm giving the credit note. So I can give the amount INR and then select. Let us say in case of a credit memo, you need to give the negative amount. Let us say it's minus 900. And also the invoice type. Invoice type you need to change to credit memo. In case of a credit memo, you need to change the type to credit memo. So if it is a standard, okay, the PO non-PO invoices, by default it will be standard. Okay, you can continue with the type standard. Whereas a credit memo, you need to select the type credit memo. Okay, let us say it's services not rendered. Okay, or maybe the goods written, whatever it is, you can give that way and expand the lines. And then also the amount can be in negative amount, all should be in negative amount, and then you can select the distribution combination. So I can also give a blank search here or the time of distribution combination. So and I can select these the consultancy charges which I pretty much know, so I can select it. So I'm reducing my expenses to some extent. Okay, so let us see the accounting entry for this. Let me validate and then let me post to ledger. Okay, just give me accounting. So my liability is getting debited and then my expense is getting credited. In a way, my expense is getting reduced by the passage of credit memo. Okay, so the same thing applies to the debit memo. Only thing is you need to select the type as debit memo. So typically debit memo is self-generated rather than supplier providing you. You debit the supplier. Of course, in Oracle Fusion, both access same way. A credit memo or debit memo reduces your supplier liability. However, in case of a goods return, we have an option where we can auto generate the debit memo. So if you're using that functionality, the system will automatically generate the debit memo. Or else instead of you waiting for vendor to submit the credit memo, if you are generating on your own by debiting your vendor debit, so use the type as debit memo. However, the functionality for credit memo and debit memo are more or less the same. Okay. Only thing for debit memo, you need to select the type as debit memo. As simple as that. So make sure that for credit memo or debit memo, you give the amounts in negative. Header and line, make sure that it's in negative. Yeah. Now let's proceed to the invoice validation in bulk and also how can you initiate the approvals in bulk. Instead of validating at each and every invoice level, how can you do it in bulk? So for which, if you want to do the validation in bulk, you can go to the task list again. So you have an option, validate invoices. Okay, you can validate the invoice in bulk. You can click on validate invoices. Then you select the business unit for which you want to validate. Okay, so let me select NVA Telecom BU. So I'll select the business unit for which I want to validate. Or also I can select the moment you select the BU, the ledger will default. So if you want to, you have several criteria here to validate the invoices. You can validate through invoice group. You can validate from let's say 25th of Feb to 28th February. Or else you want to validate against a specific supplier, pay group, invoice number, or entered by. Okay, let's say if because it's the one who is entering the invoice, you want to validate only the invoice that needs to be validated by specific user. You can give the username also and then you can just submit it. Also if you provide default, so all the invoices will validate at once. So there is nothing but validate payables invoices in bulk. So that's why I think the moment you submit this process, all the invoices that is pending for validation will validate automatically. So let's get to the final step, initiate workflow approval. So I whenever you want to initiate the approval invoice in one-on-one basis, you can go to the invoice and you can go to the invoice actions and you can initiate for the workflow approval. However, if you want to initiate in bulk, you can go to the task list and click on initiate approval workflow. So you can just click on initiate workflow approval. You can select your business unit. So let us say NVA Telecom BU. Okay, you can select your business unit, and also just like validation in approvals also you have different parameters where you can select from invoice date to invoice date, or specific invoice number, or specific source, maybe manual or spreadsheet, you can select the source. And if you want, you can also select the approval status, what are the invoices in which approval status you want to get it approved. If you want to submit as against a supplier or party, you can give it as a specific parameter, okay, to filter the invoices that is getting approved. Once you select that, you can just give submit. So that's with regard to the approval workflow initiation. And the final step is, if you want to query the invoices, you can go to the task list and click on manage invoices. You have several parameters in the manage invoices. You can query by the invoice numbers or the business unit, invoice date, supplier, or party. Let us say if I want to query based on Reliance Communications. Okay, I can give the supplier and give a search. Okay, so you have the period criteria. So let us say 180 plus days, or else within specific days. Okay, if you want to create a query for last 30 days, you can query it. Also, you can give the maximum. Yeah, now I could see there are a couple of invoices where I could also see the unpaid amount as against these invoices. Invoice type, validation status, approval is not required. Yeah, you can see all this information by manage invoices, where I can query the invoices and also see the details of it. I can also click on the hyperlink to navigate to that invoice. Yeah, so if you want to do any attachments also, you can do an attachments at the invoice level. You can also do an attachments. Let's say if you want to attach any supplier invoice copy, you can do a attachment also at the time of creation itself, invoice creation itself. Yeah, so let's try quickly recap what we have discussed in this video. So we have seen creation of non-PO invoice, we have seen creation of PO invoice, we have seen the credit memo, we have seen similar debit memo, validate invoice in bulk, initiate approval workflow, and finally we have seen also the manage invoices in order for you to query it. Thank you everyone.